Friday, July 15. Once again, for the second day in a row, I have a list. See, it's a bit breezy this evening. And on that list, virtually all NGC clusters of one type or another. These should all be studies that will culminate as soon as it gets dark. At least that's my hope. Although some of them are bound, no matter how high they might get, to the south, to be behind that ridge line up there, or those branches. Oh, there's that nice little dip right there. I've already checked the alignment on the scope. It wasn't bad. Right now it's pointed at Vega. I'm going to let it go without a lot of alignment tonight except for purely digital. And hopefully things will track out pretty well. So I've got about 10 studies on the list, and it probably won't be another hour before I get to see them, but I might as well just go ahead and play around with the alignment a little bit while I'm waiting. Well, southerly in declination study on my list is NGC 6124. And if you sight along the scope, you will see right now we'd have to look right through that bush and probably that hillside in the distance. So that doesn't look very promising. I may just strike it off the list. Although it will rise a little higher, but it'll probably pretty much follow the contours of the hillside. Let's go on up the list. NGC 6231, I'd have to look right through the house across the way. Unlikely. Off the list. The next is on 6242 as well. This is the first of the four that I've been searching of that have been above 40 degrees negative declination. 6322, also a no-show. Now, at minus 38 degrees, NGC 6281 might just be visible if I were to cut the pear tree back a little bit, but I don't think we're going to be seeing it at any point, not from 44 degrees north latitude. At a little less than minus 30 degrees, if it were dark enough, I'd be able to pick out globular cluster NGC 6304 in the night sky, right there. And it'll probably be a better view in about an hour, so we should be able to have a look at that one later on this evening. In the hopes of improving stellar images, I'm going to start with a fairly fast 64 flood and only a 30 decibels of automatic gain control this evening. It'll be an interesting experiment. I suspect I'll probably end up at 128 again, as I did last night, but let's give it a shot, especially for clusters. We want those pinpricky stars. Antares looks like at the 6430 setting. Notice the spikes. That means that Antares is probably lying exactly behind the power lines to the south of the observatory, which causes a diffraction of the light. Antares is actually a double star, but it would not be resolvable without the use of an eyepiece on a 6-inch telescope due to the lack of resolution on the imaging system. The sky is not exactly dark yet. I've centered the scope once again on Antares, and I've laid in a course for NGC 6304, which is a smallish 4 arc-minute sized magnitude 8.4 globular cluster in Ophiuchus, 30 degrees below the celestial equator. And now we're going to take a look using the 30 auto gain and 64 exposure setting at what comes up on the screen. It's pretty clear that our cluster is located right about there. I can see some resolution of stars. There's a bright line of them right across the core. As an 8.4 magnitude cluster, you would expect stars to 14th magnitude to be resolved at best. And we're getting some of that even at these lower exposure time settings and gain control. Meanwhile, the field stars are looking quite attractive. So I think I'll stay with this setting for the rest of the evening and see what virtues we can get in the images on the rest of the studies on my list. Like the previous globular cluster, NGC 6316 also should give you a pretty decent view in a 10-inch scope. Magnitude's a little fainter, but it's a little brighter, but it's a little larger in size. It's 37,000 light years, and it's roughly at about the same declination, 28 degrees negative. So let's have a look at that. And as we do so, notice how quickly the image formulates at these faster shutter speeds. Wow. Immediately after the first pass, about 3 seconds, you can see the cluster in this location right about here. It too has some faint stars being resolved, like in the previous cluster. Core is glowing. Stars in the field look quite nice. The aesthetics are good. See, after 6 image stacks at roughly, I think it's about 0.6 seconds a stack. So we're talking about a 4-second image assembly cycle using these settings. What we're getting here basically is multiple iterations. I think maybe even more than 6, but I had understood it to be 6. So here we are. A faintish cluster that's revealing itself under less than ideal conditions to the deep south, with pinpricky looking stars, at least for this particular screen. No complaints here. If I had a view like this at the eyepiece, I probably would think it would be superb. NGC 6293 is another globular cluster, also in Ophiuchus. Smallish, 3.5 arc minutes. Slightly brighter than the previous ones. It's located 29,000 light years distant. And I misspoke in the last one. Those last 2 studies, NGC globular clusters, would reveal themselves nicely through an 8-inch scope. This one is a 10-inch scope requirement because of the angular size and distance, meaning to resolve any stars whatsoever, you'd have to have a larger aperture. So let's push the button. Go to it. Oh, wow. No, this is really quite good. More resolvable bright stars. I could attribute it, however, to the fact the sky is getting darker. I'll have to come back and at least check one of the previous ones a little later on as the sky gets dark. But look at all the resolvable stars there. Look how much nicer the field stars are at these faster shutter speeds. Very, very nice. And as I watch, a few more stars in the cluster are revealing themselves, as you can see on the screen here. Very nice. I would say that the size of the cluster was misstated in the data. This one looks to be at least 5 arc minutes across the visible stars. Very, very nice. This will probably be the most difficult globular cluster of the evening. It's magnitude 9.5, small, about 3 arc minutes. It's 30,000 light years away. It's a little further north. The sky is getting darker right now. This is on the 9.5 magnitude size level. It's basically gives you a halfway decent view in a 12-inch telescope. So here we go. Let's have a look. Yeah, you can see the cluster right here, near the center of the field of view. Very bright core, some faint outliers. Those would have to be 15th magnitude stars around it. It just continues to impress me how much magnitudinal reach is gained by using one of these imagers. Even when you slow the speed to shutter speeds up so you get better looking star fields. Very impressive. We'll give you a little tutorial on how to use the Go-To on this. This is the classic screen for manipulating the pointing of the telescope in right ascension and declination. Gives you values like right ascension, the declination at which the scope is pointed, and the time of day, etc., local time. Press the Go-To button. You go to Catalog Object, scroll down till you see Messier. Once you're in Messier, you put in the number, in this case it's single digits. Press Enter, you wait about 6 or 7 seconds. Normally, in this case this is a Messier, so it probably only takes about a second, but NGCs take 6 or 7 seconds. You select Go-To, and then scope slews, and you end up with a view like this of M9. Beautiful. The stars aren't overwhelmingly bloated. I could probably drop the exposure time down to 32 flood, keep the gain control, or play with the gain control, and we could even improve on it better in terms of the aesthetics, although we'll lose some deep skies depth. But let's leave it here for the rest of this evening. I've already imaged M62 at a higher flood rate. Declination's about the same as M9. Scope size though, magnitude 6.4. M9, a 6-inch scope with an eyepiece should give you a decent view. I think this is more like a 5-inch scope. The cluster is 22.5 kilolight years distant. Ooh, the size is fairly large too, 14 arc minutes. So this one should get close to filling the screen if we could capture all the stars, which is very doubtful. Okay, let's take a look. Here we go. Oh, you can obviously see it's an enormous cluster. Yeah. Wow. Very bright stars, almost to the point of bloating. The core is completely over-illuminated. Could certainly drop down the flood rating on this one. And perhaps another night out using shorter exposure times would be warranted in terms of aesthetics, especially on the brighter Messiers. So there's your view. Impressive. Okay, misspoke on the last one. M62 would give a good view in a 4-inch. This would give a good view in a 5-inch scope. Its magnitude is 6.8. It's about 5 arc minutes. It's located 28,000 light years, 28,000 light years distant. basically about the same declination. There sure are a lot of nice clusters in this particular area of sky. Of course, it's Ophiuchus. We're going to go there now. Wow. It's looking a little overwhelmed in the handheld camera, but on the screen, there's a lot of resolution stars. Several dozen are visible. Also a very V-like shape in it. I'll have to inspect this image later to see if it has a V. The tip of the V is to the left on this screen, and the mouth of the V is to the right. Once again, wow, these lower settings are really improving the aesthetics of the view. NGC 6284 will probably be the faintest cluster we'll image this evening. It's located 47,000 light years distant. Very small, less than 3 arc minutes, and its magnitude is 9. A 12-inch scope should give it a decent view. Let's see what happens when we use the imager. Well, we are resolving stars. It's got a bright core. Wow, I am just so surprised. Those must be 15th magnitude stars this imager is revealing, even when you're using 64 flood, which is 6 cycles of about 0.6 seconds. 3. Wow. So less than 4-second exposure times. And look what we're picking up. And the stars are looking fairly fine in the field of view. Soak it in. This one's a long way off. Another faint, tight, smallish globular cluster in Ophiuchus. This one is closer at 27,000 light years, which is a little more than half the distance of the last one. 10-inch scope should give a good view of this one. And we'll go ahead and go to it. Well, as soon as the scope stabilized, we started resolving the cluster there, right in the middle of the field of view. So it looks like the tracking has been improving. I've been doing a lot of recentering and aligning with some of the earlier studies, and now the result is more consistent. But that, interesting how there's so many of these brightest stars here, and there's a dearth over here. Maybe there's some kind of dark nebula. Of course, there's space insects climbing around in space there. They seem to be winged beasts. Well, there's another unexpected view at a fairly fast exposure time setting of 64 flood at 30 decibels of auto gain control, which means it's updating the image, like I said, less than 4 seconds. And it sure did pop up quickly when we oriented the scope to it. I continue to be impressed with how much flexibility you get in the settings on the CCD imager. We had to do one more, but this one ought to be something we could use as a baseline. I've had several images of the Ring Nebula. Why don't we go take a look at that before we say Carpe Noctem. Well, I'm thinking the sky is going to get about as dark as it is going to get tonight. And here we have the ring at the same settings as the globular clusters that we saw in Ophiuchus and Scorpius. I can see the central star, the 13th magnitude perimeter star near the ring is quite bright. So I'm thinking, knowing that's a 13th magnitude star and looking at the ring and being able to see the central star, I'm saying to myself, you know, we were really seeing 15th magnitude stars even on the shorter exposure times. But let's try this. I did say that I wanted to go back to one of the original studies, the very first one that we turned up once the sky dark occurred, and we now have a beautiful sky dark and the moon has yet to enter the picture. Let's go back and take a look at that just for comparison. It was an NGC cluster. With the sky about as dark as it's going to get tonight, heading back to that 8.5 magnitude NGC 6304. Wow. Very nice. It does kind of beg the notion that we should try changing the setting and see what comes of it. If I can do that. It's kind of upside down. Scene select custom. Shutter AGC manual. 64 flood and 30 decibels. Let's take a look. Let's see if I can get it to go down to, well, not there. Nope, that's going to be too bright. 128, 64, 32. Give it a second. Oh, yeah, what a big difference. Now let's see what the auto gain control happens to do to it. Nope, come back, find the right button. Oh, please. There we go. 24, I'm going to take it out of the picture. 30, 36. Well, that seems to return it almost to 32 flood, but it doesn't have as much resolution, so let's leave it at 30 and let's go back, have one more look at 32, give it a chance to generate itself. Nope. Looking at this, I would say those original settings were just like the cat's meow. Navigating. Nope. 64, 30. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we have found the optimal settings for the time being. How about that? Well, carpe noctem.